Okay, this is Moss Tutorial 2.0. I know from reading the comments some people had a hard time following the last one, and in an effort to make things succinct, it seems like a few important details got left on the cutting room floor. So, we're going to do this in real time, and we're going to make some moss. So first things first, you got your monkey. We are going to add a new material. Let's call it rock, and we're going to go to the shading tab. We will grab a random rock texture, and there's our rock. It looks like crap, so we're just going to hit U, unwrap, cube project, and now we have a decent projection of this rock texture. So this rock texture is just going to be what it is. You can make this anything you want. I'm going to hit Control G, and that's going to make it a group. I will hit Tab, and now that texture is in its own group, which if you click this, you can go in and out of it. So this is going to be a way to keep things organized. Now, I'm going to make another new texture, Principled BSDF. I'm going to add a noise texture. I'm going to add a color ramp, and this is going to be our moss. Scale it up, scale up the detail, scale up the roughness, and we're just going to change these colors to shades of green. Doesn't have to be really detailed. This is what we're going to cover with hair particles later on. Let's just up that a little bit more, and then we're going to take this same factor and we're going to put it into the normal. Right now it doesn't do anything, so we need to add vector bump. And now it looks insane, so we're going to decrease the distance to something like 0.1 or 0.05, and maybe decrease the strength. And turn the specularity down to about 0.2, and we're going to turn the roughness to about 8. And now this is our moss. So now we will take both of these textures, we will combine them with a mix shader. So at the moment, it doesn't look like anything because a factor of 1 is going to give us what's in the bottom socket, which is our rock texture. A factor of 0 is going to give us our moss texture. So Control G, tab back out of that. So now here's our moss, here's our rock, nice and organized. I'm going to add a new image texture. We're going to use the image texture to drive our factor value. Now by default, there's nothing in the image texture currently, so our factor value goes back to 0, so it gives us our moss. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to make a new image. We're just going to make this 24 by 48. We're going to call this moss matte, hit OK. So right now this is just a blank image texture. If I go under UV editing, you'll see moss matte is just black. You'll also see that our cube project is just all over this thing. So that's going to be a weird unwrap. So in order to get around this so that we can actually paint on this, because if we try to paint on it right now, it's going to lose its mind. In fact, I'll show you. So with our moss matte selected, if we go back here and we say texture paint, I try to paint on it, notice how it's going everywhere. And that's because we're still using that cube project. Now you may just say, well, why don't we just use a different project method from the start? And you can, but what I wanted to do is get across to you how we can use two different UV maps. So right now we've got the initial UV map in there. We'll click the plus button. We'll retitle this one Moss Map, and make sure that it's turned on. That's important. That's the active render. So now when we hit this and we say U Smart UV Project, now what we should see in our UV edit is see how it's nice and unwrapped. Now if I go back over here and I turn on this UV matte, notice how that one's all scrunched together, which is why we're not getting a good paint. So over here, everything should be laid out nice and clean. So now the difference is when we go over here to our layout with that moss matte selected, it'll give us a better result. So the only thing we need to do to finish setting this up is in our shading. Here's our moss matte, but it's got nothing driving the vector. So I'm going to search UV map, and down here I'm going to plug this in. I'm going to choose moss map. Now what we'll need to do is assign the proper UV maps for each group. So we're going to jump back in here, and you'll notice that in our rock texture, it's using the UV coordinates that it originally generated. So we're going to delete both of these. And in its place, we're going to say UV map, and we're going to reconnect the UV to these. Now remember, this is our rock texture. And you'll notice if I want to just view the rock texture on its own, It's going to change if I say original UV map or if I say MOS map. It can be slightly different. So we're going to use the UV map because that's what we originally want. You could use just one map, but again, this was just as an educational way of showing that you can use more than one UV. So our MOS mat, which is blank right now, is being driven using our MOS map Smart UV project. All our other nodes, our MOS and our rock, those are being driven with the original UV map. Currently, I actually want to switch these because a value of 0 is giving us this one. And Blender works in hierarchy. So 0 is going to give you the first node, a value of 1 is going to give you the second node. So I actually want to switch these around. I want MOS to be a value of 1, and I want the rock texture to be a value of 0. So now what you'll see is our rock texture is going to be the thing that shows up first. If I say 1, it's going to give us MOS. If I say 0, it's going to give us rock. So again, we're going to insert this into our factor value. Right now, this is a value of 0 because it's black. So nothing's happening. But with our MOS mat selected, and this is important, if your MOS mat selected, go back here, and now you say texture paint, you'll notice that wherever I paint this, there we go, sorry. Now you'll notice that wherever I paint, it's exactly where it ought to be. It's where you would expect it to be. Okay, so this is good. We're about halfway there. So now all you have to do is set up your particles. We're going to say new particle system. We're going to say hair. We're going to make the length very short. And we're going to increase the amount to something really high. I'm going to just say 8500. Go under here, we'll have a new material. This is going to be our MOS hair material. We'll call this MOS hair. And we're going to change this to a principled hair DSDF. We'll change it to green. And now we will mess with this MOS hair value. Change our roughness to 0.6 and radial roughness 0.750. Now, we're back under our particle settings. We will select the material as MOS hair. And if we quickly jump into cycles view, you can see that it's giving us these big spikes, which look really stupid. So we're going to change children to interpolated. We're going to make the render amount 20. We're going to make the display amount 20, make it nice and thick. Hair shape, we will change our diameter root to something like 0.2, which looks pretty decent, maybe 0.5 on our diameter root for this. And the first tutorial of this I messed with roughness and other things, and I mean, you can just do whatever you think looks most like MOS. Now if we jump back into rendered view, we can see that this has given us kind of that grassy, mossy look. So the way to make this work, we're going to go to the Textures tab. We're going to say New. We're going to select the MOS mat. We're going to change the name of this texture to something we can find, like MOS mat. We'll go back to the Particles tab. Under Textures, we will select the MOS mat mate. And then back under the Textures tab, it now gives us the option for our coordinates. For mapping, we will say UV, which is important so it knows which UV map to listen to. We will then choose MOS map. This is what makes this work. Then under influence, we will check density. And you'll notice all of our hair went away. And that's because nothing has been painted into the MOS mat. So now it's all set up. We have density under the influence of the particles. Our coordinates are set to UV, they're set to MOS map, so now when I choose texture paint and I paint on here, you'll notice that nothing's happening. You think, uh-oh, what's happened? Well, I'll tell you what's happened. Under the texture, it's tiling its own mat. And this makes sense because the last texture we set up was this mat itself. So it can't paint itself on itself. So all we have to do is go under texture and just say X. And now, when we paint on it, you'll notice not only are we getting our white strokes, we're also getting these little purple hairs. So when we go into our rendered view, we can paint this on, and in real time, we're getting moss to grow places. Wherever we paint it, moss will grow. Now again, this is fine if you have a really fast graphics card. However real time it is depends greatly on your graphics. And what you'll notice is it's actually much more responsive in material preview mode than it is in rendered mode. So if you want to do any of your real-time painting, you're probably going to have a better chance of doing it here unless you got a killer graphics card. But now we can pretty much do all of our real-time painting. When we switch into Cycles preview, we'll see that it's giving us this thick, full moss texture. And that's how it's done. Hopefully this was helpful and cleared up anything that was lost in the shorter version. Thanks for watching.